Hello there and welcome to the program. I am Imonia Marire. Before we go straight into our program today, let's remind you that is a momentous day at the Supreme Court of Nigeria today, where the Apex Court is sitting and delivering judgment on about 7 governorship appeal cases. So far, 3 of those 7 cases have been decided. Those are for Lagos, where the sitting governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, was affirmed as governor of the state, and that of Bauchi State, where Governor Bala Mohammed has also been affirmed, and in Kano State, where Abba Yusuf of the NNPP has also been affirmed as the governor of the state. Of course, the Kano State verdict was much anticipated as a result of the fact that at the tribunal and court of appeal levels, the governor lost, but the Supreme Court has reversed that and has now affirmed Abba Yusuf as governor of Kano State. So, also being expected now, at this time is the one from Zamfara State, Plateau State, Abia State, and Ebonyi State. And in the course of the program, if and when we do get the outcomes of those cases, we will be bringing them to you. Right, so let's go on to our topic for today, our discourse for today. Now, in the last couple of weeks, issues and cases of corruption, fraud, and abuse of office in the public sector have dominated the public space in Nigeria. Corruption is, of course, a global phenomenon. It has been a major headache in Nigeria for decades, if not in all of its 63 years of existence as an independent country. Government after government has put in place structures and systems to deal with the menace, but it appears to get more entrenched each passing day. Not even laws and the establishment of anti-corruption agencies have had a mitigating effect on the rate and magnitude of corruption, particularly in the public sector. We have been witnesses to situations where political appointees and civil servants alike regard government resources as a bazaar to be feasted on with reckless abandon, with no regard for financial rules, policies, processes, and regulations, or indeed concerns for accountability and transparency. Corruption, fraud, stealing, and illegal primitive accumulation of public resources for private aggrandizement have become ingrained in the psyche of the average public officer, contrary to the oaths of office that they glibly subscribe to. The various attempts or efforts at curbing, tackling, or fighting these monsters at different levels and at different times have come to naught. So much so that Nigeria is derisively referred to in some quarters as fantastically corrupt. In light of the very recent developments involving a serving minister, former ministers, career civil servants, central bank directors, and commercial bank executives with the alleged collaboration of private businesses and individuals, we are compelled to take another look at the corruption phenomenon, its motivation, and push factors. Some analysts have argued that it is a system-driven problem that requires new strategies and thought processes to deal with, including a courageous political will. But where will that courage come from? Can the system be reformed, or will it be business as usual? Can we reverse the situation that we have on our hands in Nigeria today? These are some of the issues that we'll be looking at on the program today. And I'm joined by 3 analysts. First, here in the studio, we have Dr. Abubakar Akali, who is a senior lecturer at Bayes University here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Thank you so much, Doc, for finding time to join us.
Good to see you, man.
We're also joined virtually from Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, by Babatunde Oluwajo, a corruption risk analyst and board member, Center for Transparency Advocacy. He's joining us from Ibadan. We're also joined from Benin, the Edo State capital, by Osemaye Newton. He's a program director, Initiative for Policy Intervention and Development, and consultant on the European Union Agent for Citizen-Driven Transformation Program. He also, in the past, managed the anti-corruption desk in the British Council with J4A program, and of course, he was also project manager, anti-corruption project of Action Aid Nigeria between 2017 and 2020. Osemaye Newton, thank you so much for finding time to join us.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Pleasure having me.
Welcome. I hope you have not just arrived from Mexico. That your heart looks very Mexican. Welcome indeed. All right, gentlemen. Let's begin with some conceptual understanding of what corruption is. Let's begin from what is corruption? How can we properly conceptualize and define corruption?
Yeah, well, corruption, within the context of both the public and private sector is taking undue advantage of, a certain situation for personal aggrandizement, to take something, that does not belong to someone. So essentially, you are looking at corruption as, something to do with breaking a particular law, or procedure or process, and taking undue advantage, of a porous situation to, benefit illegally from that porosity. So, as you rightly stated in your, in your presentation, it is a systemic problem we have in Nigeria, and of course, to fix it. By the way, it's not something that you can actually apply a one-off solution. Okay, it is a gradual process. Okay, so to fix it in Nigeria, there are very hard decisions that have to be taken.
We'll come back to the details of how to fix it. Okay. Let's go to Babatunde Oluwajo in Ibadan. Tell us from your experience in this area of governance, what exactly you may conceive as corruption.
Well, thanks again for having me. I think a lot of work has been done with regards to trying to define what corruption is. And I think there's a globally accepted definition, which is that corruption is the use of entrusted power for private gains, whether in the private sector, whether in the public sector. The idea of being a minister, being a DG, being the director of private companies, that you have been entrusted certain powers. So when you turn around to use such powers for your own private gain, instead of general good, or instead of the common, in the case, for example, of a private company where you have shareholders, as a director, as an MD, as a CEO, when you turn around and use those entrusted powers for your private gain, that is what is generally accepted to be corruption. And that happens both in the private and equally in the public sector, where individuals are given this power, either by way of being voted into power, either by way of being appointed into certain offices. You turn around to use those powers and those privileges to enrich yourself.
Now, I asked that question, Babatunde, because you recall that in the past, a Nigerian president once distinguished between corruption and stealing. Can stealing or indeed fraud be categorized or conceptualized as corruption?
Well, I think in the past I've had to address that unfounded dichotomy. Stealing itself is one of the manifestations of corruption. Because for you to steal, you must have some level of access to that particular resources you are stealing. So it is a form of abuse of entrusted for your own private gain. So that dichotomy is artificial. I don't know where the former president got that from, but in the points I've had to address it, and I said that it's more or less a validation of public routine. So stealing is different from corruption. I don't know where he got that from. And to be put for him, maybe he would do a treatise on that is a theory of stealing is not the same thing as corruption. You cannot tie goat to yam, and you expect yam not to eat goat or goat not to eat yam. The question is, what is your business going to tie yam and goat together? So for me, it is a fallacious dichotomy that does not exist in real life. For you to be able to steal, you have some privileged access. And that access is a product of the fact that you have been entrusted certain things. And you are supposed to entrust those, use those, don't use those powers for the public good and not necessarily for enriching yourself. So that dichotomy is fallacious and does not exist in reality.
All right, Newton, let's come to you. Let's get your understanding of corruption and what you think are the push factors, the motivation for those who are involved in corruption. Hello, Newton, you will need to unmute so that we can hear you right here in the studio.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I wouldn't agree less with my colleagues both in the studio and my very good friend joining online. Well, the agreed definition is there globally, but I've also have some worries as concerning that definition because I think that definition, to a large extent, is still not conceptualized. Looking at the context of either the region or the culture or the places where people come from to give a proper definition to corruption. And the word corruption also is actually broad, like Babatunde rightly explained, stealing, dishonesty, and abuse of processes, and what have you. They are all parts of corruption. Once a process does not follow a laid-down rule, it's already corrupt by definition. So I also strongly agree with him and disagreeing with the president, the past president, that corruption is different from stealing. That is my own view. But my argument, like I said, is it's high time because the way corruption is going globally is progressive and is coming with different dimensions. I think that definition seems a bit still limited for me, but that is what we have right now, and that is what we are working with. Then in terms of things that actually drive corruption, it still depends on different countries. I don't think what drives corruption, for instance, in the U.S. is the same as what drives corruption in Nigeria, and that is the major problem with the kind of strategy that I think we're going to talk on that later. That's the major problem with the kind of strategy that we need to design to be able to address corruption within the context that particular corruption is happening. For instance, I don't think that globally there is a one-size-fits-all strategy or system of addressing corruption because of the definition that are emanating and the manifestations that are also emanating from the country. In 2017, I read a report by ActionAid Nigeria where it was reported that there's a strong correlation between corruption and poverty. And so for me, if I want to argue from that angle, I can say poverty is one of those things that drives corruption. But people will also want to argue, the people that are stealing public resources, are they not rich already? But the question is, if you look at the dependence of people who rely on these people in politics that are stealing money, you can see that they are poor. For instance, if you are in office, somebody will come and tell you that the wife just put to bed in the hospital because government has not provided health services for these people. Of course, that is our definition of poverty. They don't have access to these basic amenities. So government has not provided proper care facilities in the hospital. And the person look onto you because you are in power and believes that once you have money to give to him, or her to solve a problem at home, that automatically solve the problem. Of course, these people are under this pressure most times to steal, to be able to satisfy the poverty gap that we have in the society. So on that basis, and based on that description, I want to also agree with people who believe that poverty is one of the drivers of corruption.
Right, that's a big question, Newton. Do the rich steal because they want to satisfy the needs of the poor? Do they steal for the poor? We will answer that question, but at this point in time, let us update our viewers on happenings at the Supreme Court. The court has just affirmed the election of the governor of Zamfara State, Governor Dauda Lawal, by setting aside the decision of the Court of Appeal, which declared the post inconclusive and ordered a re-election in 3 local government areas of the state. So at the moment, the Supreme Court has affirmed the election of Governor Dauda Lawal of Zamfara State as duly elected governor of that state. That brings the number so far to 4: Lagos, Bauchi, Kano, and Zamfara. We expect about 3 or 4 more, and we're talking about Plateau, Abia, and Ebonyi. But Dr. Akali, let's come back here. Newton has just put something on the table about the correlation between corruption and poverty. Now, most of those who engage in corruption and in corrupt practices, as has been articulated by all 3 of you, are not necessarily poor people.
Yes, absolutely.
So, do the rich steal for the poor or because of the poor?
I don't think so, to be honest. I don't think the rich steal for the poor or, to serve the poor. If that is the case, then we wouldn't have the current very high level of poverty in the land. If that is the case, then it means the billions we hear every day would have now been, given out to the poor. It means somebody would have taken a billionaire or so and would have come to the village and start giving it out. But that is not the case. So the rich do not steal because of the poor or in the interest of the poor. The rich steal because it has become, a norm in the society. It has become a tradition in society. And most importantly, actually, there is no deterrent, for such action. There is nothing to deter anybody from stealing. There are the laws, but these laws are actually on paper. That you see someone stealing, confirmed to have stolen, and the next day you see him, walking a free man. So there is no deterrent to steal. I think that is the major motivation. And also the structure, of the system, the system structure itself promotes corruption. It does. Because you have a situation where the head, it has even become a norm now. The head of that unit will have to play to the whims and caprices of the constituents, the other adherents of that unit, for him to survive as a head. And people don't actually ask questions, about corruption, about acquiring illegal wealth. Somebody who acquires wealth and which is way above his legitimate income. It's not asked questions. We are living witnesses to cases where someone who is confirmed, not convicted, but confirmed, with verifiable evidence, well-documented evidence to have stolen billions, being rewarded with chieftaincy status. So how will someone not follow suit? So I think the structure of the system, as I said, as head of a unit, you have to play to corruption for you to survive. Somebody will bring in a paper which is, not right, but he expects you to approve it. If you don't, then he says you are you are the worst manager that he has worked under. So the point is, people, a lot of us simply speak about corruption. We detest it, okay? But given the chance, okay, we will do what we blame others for doing. You see, so for us to get out of that, we actually have to bear the fact that this corruption, is like a vicious circle. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help. It doesn't help even those who are doing it. Now, I give you an example. Today we have a very high level of insecurity that, even those who have this privilege of unfettered access to the treasury cannot sleep with their eyes closed. Okay? So what has brought that? Some of the factors, mitigating factors, obviously, the very high level of poverty. That's mitigating factors for insecurity, for the current very high level of insecurity. Actually, the very high poverty, which was built around the very high level of corruption that we have. So another thing also is that you find out that you need some deterrence. Okay? As I said, deterrent for me is the major cause, is the major oxygen to corruption. There is no deterrent. So now, for this deterrent to be in place, those who are supposed to put in this deterrent, to promote it and protect it, are actually also part of the corruption cycle. So how will they do that? So that is the problem. Now, you find also another factor, which is the current very high, level of materialism, in the society. Very high level of greed. This materialism promotes greed. You see, you are actually not respected. You are nobody in your society, in your community, in your household, if you are not buoyant materially. So that also promotes this aspect. As I said, it's actually a vicious cycle because those who are in power have been able to pass this poverty into the society, to distract the attention of the society from what they are doing, from the corruption they are doing. So to be honest, everybody has a very big role to play. The media, as a matter of fact, some of these things that you are doing, obviously, this program is one of them. These are ways to contribute towards ameliorating this situation. And then also, we need to have this very high level of greed and materialism, reduced to the barest minimum.
How to reduce that would be a major issue and a major discussion point. But let's go to Babatunde now. Babatunde, it appears that in spite of laws, in spite of institutions like the EFCC, ICPC, and Code of Conduct Bureau, and all of that have been put in place, corruption is becoming more endemic in our society, particularly in the public sector. You find a situation where it has become a social norm, a social culture, and it just passed on from one set of persons to another. For the questions have been asked, for example, as to how a permanent secretary in the public service, a chief accountant in the public service, an audit department in the public service will stand by, and then, by the way, the permanent secretary is regarded as the accounting officer of each ministry, and how they will stand by and allow certain things to happen, allow some individuals, other ministers or DGs, to move monies as much as 44 billion, 37 billion and 3 billion or 585 million without going through due process?
Well, I think the number one problem we have in Nigeria, and why corruption is endemic and will continue to remain endemic, is the culture of impunity. In any society where impunity is endemic, even no matter the number of laws you have, you can't address the fundamental problem of corruption. Because look at it. And we have seen many cases. Look at the Aaron case. Other crimes, other citizens are punished for their infractions in Nigeria. No Nigerian is punished. Nobody is killed. Even when it is clear the law they have played. No former vice president involved in some funny business with an American speaker. Sentenced in America. In fact, I'm aware he was sentenced in jail. But the question is, how many Nigerians have been punished for the same thing? Look at the case of the OML or thereabouts. Punished in places like Italy. But in Nigeria, how many Nigerians in jail? How many of them have been punished? So when you have a culture of impunity, what will happen is that those who will succeed, those who are currently in office, will do worse. Let us look at the scale of corruption between 1999 and now. You discover that with every regime, for every year, the scale of corruption keeps going up. And the simple reason is simply because those who did in the past, none of them were punished. So there was no deterrent. The difference between us and other countries, serious countries of the world, is that you almost guarantee that if you do the crime, you are going to do the time. But in Nigeria, the reverse is the case. You're almost sure if you steal enough, nothing will happen to you. But by a month or 2 months, it will be watched in the media. Then after, we all go back to a normal lifestyle and life continues. In such a system, there's no way, therefore, you can be able to tackle corruption. So until we are able to tackle that culture of impunity that makes it for people to do anything at will, and there's no any fear of retribution. There's no fear that, yes, if I do this, I'm going to be punished, I'm going to be asked questions. We continue to wallow in this mess called corruption. And secondly, is the fact that we still allow people to enjoy the process of crime. In other parts of the world, one of the first things they do, and which is the biggest justice for society, is that those who are involved in corruption, once you are caught, the first thing they do is to ensure that you don't enjoy the process of that criminality. Here we are today. People who have been accused of stealing humongous sums of money go to take up citizenship title. They could do it because they save a lot in at their disposal. Then they could use to buy citizenship title and buy everybody inside. We need to come to the point where anybody with funds who is even suspected, you are denied the enjoyment of that process of crime. And secondly, you are made an example of, that impunity must stop. There must be fear. With that if I do this and I'm caught, there's going to be a repercussion. And again, I think we need to start to reward good behavior. Because when we talk about stealing, there are still people within the system who are examples, who are, islands of integrity. But the question is, who recognizes them? We actually do. We actually recognize our reward behavior. So I think we must do this too in order to that there's an alternative to being corrupt. That you can do good and do right, as one of my boss would say. So we can do the right thing and get rewarded, and will not also be seeing the faces of criminals and thieves and public looters alone in the front pages of our media and the front on the televisions, and their name being talked about everywhere. We need to start to reward good behavior. Thank you.
All right, Newton, do you agree with the argument that corruption has become skin deep and system deep in Nigeria, that is almost becoming impossible to root out?
Yeah, completely. I agree, and I also agree with the position of Babatunde. But my own take is, first and foremost, let me come from the angle of the report I made reference to about the correlation between poverty and corruption. You see, if you look at the index report, the CPI report for a very long time, you see that there is there's this tendency of having those countries that are poor at the lower rating of the CPI report. So what it shows is that if you look at countries that are poor in Africa, for instance, they are all at the lower ladder. That does not mean corruption does not exist in other parts of the world. But that brings me back to what is actually the mechanism or the strategy or the anti-corruption response that we have in other countries. In this country, I think that our anti-corruption response is too heavy on punitive and corrective. And I also want to use this platform to suggest that the anti-corruption agency should try as much as possible to look at preventive measures of fighting corruption. For instance, for me, it is easier for you to address corruption by not allowing the thieves, as we call them in quote, by not allowing the thieves to even have access to the fund in the first place, than to allow them to have access to the fund. And the kind of fund that they will have access to, first and foremost, is bigger than the anti-corruption agency's budget. And the anti-corruption agencies begin to swim against a very high current of corruption with the little budget that they have to fight a massive amount that has been stolen or a mega corruption that has happened in some of these ministries. So if you don't allow them to have access to this in the first place, it will help us first and foremost. It will help the anti-corruption agencies. It will help the people who have the potential to steal. It will also help Nigerians as a whole. Then again, I think our integrity test is also very weak, especially at the National Assembly level where confirmations are made. For instance, somebody who has never in his or her life managed a portfolio of 6 billion, and you are confirming that person to be a minister in a country where the budget will be around maybe 3 point something billion or 300 billion as a whole. Of course, that is a high risk for anybody who understands. I think Babatude will understand this better. That is a high risk for anybody who understands corruption assessment. That this person has a high risk and a high tendency to be corrupt because the person has never seen that kind of volume of money in his or her life. That is the integrity check is also very, very, very weak for me because again. Like what just happened, the question I will ask is, what was the background check on the people who had access to this money? What was the background check on them? How much have they seen before in their life? How much have they managed before in their life to have access to this kind of fund? So the preventive measures need to be reawakened. I think ICPC and EFCC, they are not doing enough in that aspect. ICPC will wait, EFCC will wait on the people who have stolen enough to even fight them before they begin to pursue them. In the end, they don't even have the resources to pursue this case to logical conclusion. It becomes a problem for both Nigerians, for the EFCC, and of course for the generality of Nigerians. I think the best strategy that we need to look at within the context of our own country is preventive measures.
All right. We'll come back to you and hope that by the time we come back to you, that interfering audio from the background would have been gone. But let's get back to Dr. Akali here, and because he has talked about integrity checks on those that are put in places. That could work, for instance, for appointees, political appointees, to do integrity check. But what do you do with core civil servants who grow through the ranks to become directors, permanent secretaries, accountants and accountant generals and all of that, and who then go ahead to dip their fingers in the public till and steal as much as they want without, sometimes without being detected, sometimes without being caught, and sometimes just named as mere collaborators. I ask that question against the backdrop of the fact that there are rules, there are regulations, there are procedures and processes in the civil service for the approval of procurements and of release of funds which go through these processes. And there are stages for these things that go through. And where, for instance, a political appointee moves monies and says it's a mistake in some cases, or makes payments that are not, have not gone through the due process, and there is a permanent secretary there. There are directors in that ministry. I mean, there is a management of the ministry. including accountants, auditors, and what have you. What kind of integrity checks do you put on those
Yeah.
kind of people?
Yes, that's right. Thank you. But before going to that, because I want to just say one or two things regarding the difference between corruption and stealing. Actually, corruption is a general term, okay? Cutting corners, as it were. If you put in a paper for a leave to come back within 30 days and you took 45 days, that's actually corruption. But stealing is more direct. You know, when you take ₦1, when you take that chair or that table that doesn't belong to you, that is stealing. So stealing is subsumed under corruption, but not all forms of corruption are stealing. Corruption is a more wider term. It's generally cutting corners. Now back to your question. Yes, to be honest, and I've always believed this, there is no kobo that goes out of the purse of government without the support of the civil servant. So you were right to say that the permanent secretary was there, the directors were there, and you still have 44 billion, paid into a private account. And that is why, if you ask me, I will not support the idea of the suspended minister, Betta Edu, actually handing over to the permanent secretary, because the permanent secretary is also in the know. If he claims he doesn't know how 44 billion was transferred to a private account from his ministry, that means he doesn't know his remit. That's what it means. So the permanent secretary must have been aware of the payment of that 44 billion, okay, from his ministry to a private account. And Section 713 of Nigeria's Financial Regulations Act 2009 is clear. You cannot move private money into public account and vice versa. You cannot move public money into private accounts. Okay, so that permanent secretary, for me, shouldn't be heading that ministry. It would have been better to bring in someone, from the outside.
Some have even suggested that all of them, or the entire management of that ministry should be
go
investigated.
Absolutely, that's
yes.
where I was coming to.
Yes.
You see, this thing is a culture, to be honest. There are so many things happening in this country, Mark, that you and I know, that are covered. Now, look at even the award of contracts. This is very open. Everybody knows this. Contracts are awarded 100 times. And who does this? It is the civil servants. Contracts are awarded. A 200 million naira contract is awarded, and the contractor is told you are bringing back 50%. This is common knowledge. Everybody knows this. So who does this? It is the civil servant. Now, this is one area that I think we need to rejig the anti-corruption crusade. Going after public figures, politicians, will not really solve the problem. Going after just politicians, because the politicians obviously are the ones that are more, popular, that are more well-known. So arresting them will kind of, spike more interest among the populace. Okay, look at the issue of the Betta Edu.
Nobody is mentioning the civil servants.
Nobody
now.
is mentioning the civil servants.
And in fact, for the first time, many people will be hearing of the names of some permanent secretaries for the first time.
For the very first time.
Yet they are the accounting officers of those ministries.
They are the accounting officers of those ministries. And there is no kobo that goes out of that ministry without the knowledge of the PAMSEC. If he says he doesn't know, then that means he doesn't know his job. Simple as that. Now, down to the directors. You have procurement within the ministry. That is one area. The director of procurement within that ministry. Nothing is bought, nothing is implemented in terms of monetary transaction without the support of without the knowledge of, he actually initiates this, the director of procurement, the procurement department. So for me, not even Mark, to be honest with you, not even saying all the directors, for me, and I studied it as much, there is the need to scrap that ministry, if you ask me. Yeah, because you see...
we have been dealing with only one ministry now because it's blown into the open. There may be a can of worms in each and every ministry.
But the advantage, Mark, there is that by the time, you have to start from somewhere. By the time, and that's what my colleague was saying online, impunity, culture of impunity, deterrent. By the time you start with one example, you set a precedent, you set a case study, you set a deterrent. Others will sit up, okay? And obviously I agree with you. This is just one ministry. What happens to the other ministries? This is the same thing going on there. But as I said, you cannot do everything all at the same time. So I start with this humanitarian affairs. It has proven to be a cesspool of corruption. It has proven to be just a pot of corruption where, I mean, election money and all of that are sourced. And why did I say this? Now, look at it. They are meant to alleviate poverty, right? Every day, the National Bureau of Statistics tells us poverty has risen. And billions of naira goes into that ministry. Just 2022, end of 2022, stroke 2020, just before the election, the ICPC actually uncovered 50 billion in that ministry, kept somewhere, just somewhere. So that is one ministry that was created, okay, maybe for personal gain, you know, to maybe settle someone, okay? And that is one ministry where you have money just paid into that ministry. Very little overhead. Just do what you want to do with it. Vulnerable. This is who is not vulnerable in Nigeria? Mark, tell me, who is not vulnerable in Nigeria? Poorest of the poor.
When the National Social Insurance Program was under the office of the Vice President in the last dispensation, before it was upgraded to a ministry, there weren't such scandals as well.
Yeah, you know that was the building block. That was the foundation, okay? So by the time everything came out and people actually noticed, the civils, the officials, the public office holders noticed that is a very juicy pot. They moved there. Because, as I said, that is where money is just sent. Give it to who you want. And you see, if you are supposed to give, if there are 40 local governments in a state, and you are able to cover 1 or 2 local governments, what you just need to do is just show it on television that you have covered that state. So that is why I fully agree with the prop going on. But there is also one thing I want to say, because you see, there are some officials that are trying to cover up this Betta Edu Halima Shehu issue. There are some officials, and now they are trying to say that these are mere allegations, that until the committee, okay, submits its report, concludes its finding and submits report, that is when we'll see. Now, there is a difference between that committee set up by Mr. President and the EFCC issue. That committee is to probe the ministry to see what was done and what was not done and to recommend. But the EFCC issue, based on that, that paper signed by the minister, which says transfers also amount 44 billion into a private account.
The former minister.
The suspended minister. Sorry.
The former minister. That was the minister under the last dispensation. Was the one who moved 44 billion into a private account.
No, that's the one that was 37 billion, 37.1.
No, there are 3 of them involved here now.
Okay.
The suspended minister, the former minister, and the
director.
The director
CCT.
of, exactly.
Yes.
So there's the 44 billion, there's the 37 billion, and then, of course, the suspended minister, the whole issue of 585 billion.
585, that's
million,
right.
rather.
That's right. Where
Yes.
the suspended minister actually has to, because that's 585, he says, okay, move it to, pay it into a
Into
private,
the project
into the
accountant's
project account. Okay,
yeah.
so that's is in violation of Section 713 of the Financial Regulations.
But from what I have learned, that's been the practice over time in almost all ministries, that
That is what is
they
done.
pay monies into project accountants.
Account. And you see the
accounts.
excuse given by the director. She said, Halima Shehu, she said she moved that money because she is fearful that the minister might take it away. Now, that's not an excuse. The law does not give you that privilege. Before you do it, you should have made contacts and informed that the head of service got to approve.
Necessary
Thank
approval.
you very much.
All right, let me get back to Babatunde. Babatunde, given the time that we have left now, let's focus on new strategies. What we think should be the new strategies for curbing or indeed tackling corruption issues in Nigeria?
Well, thank you very much. I think one strategy I just want to recommend straight away is there's need for the non-conviction asset-based official law to be promulgated. Like I said, when you're fighting corruption, the biggest justice is for society is that those who are involved and who have stolen should not enjoy the process of their crime. And one way to easily do this is through the non-conviction-based asset official law, so that you come and explain to us how you alone was able to amass 50 billion. When we know the total money, the total amount your salary should amount to from the day you enter into the service until the day you retire, even if you don't spend a dime of it. So I think we need a non-conviction-based asset official law. Because for me, even if you go to jail, good and fine, that's not punishment. But the biggest justice for society is that that person and his children and family members and even his community should not enjoy the profits of corruption. We should be able to sit it and return that money to society and use the money to take care of the needs of society. So I think for me, my number one proposal is non-conviction-based asset official. Secondly, for me, like I said, is that we need to tackle impunity. This attitude of people being so sure that I can do anything and get away with it, we need to put a stop to it. And then when people know that they can be stopped from enjoying the process of their crime, it's an indirect way of tackling impunity. Because one of the reasons why people would do it is because they know that if I do it, worst case they will shout, but I'll save a substantial amount left for me to continue to enjoy the loot. You can still enjoy the loot. When people know that they will not enjoy the loot, no, not conviction-based asset official law, then the chances are that people will be more careful and they know they won't go on that meaningless trip of going to steal, of going to amass, when they know that at the end of the day, they may not enjoy, the process of that crime.
Okay. All right. Let's bring in Newton. Newton, very quickly, what if you had the opportunity, what would be the two strategies or two steps different from what has been on ground these past years that could be adopted to tackle corruption in our public service, especially?
Okay, if you ask me, the two things I will put on the table quickly is I've mentioned one before. The anti-corruption agency should be heavy on prevention and not really rely on punitive and corrective measures alone. Preventive measures should be very, very strong at this point in time because of the society where we find ourselves. Then the second thing I think we should also do as Nigerians is or as the anti-corruption agencies, is to be very scientific in the way we address corruption. For instance, looting didn't start today. We've been reporting ministers, governors, local government, chairmen, and whatever, stealing money since 1999, and we just keep reporting them. The question is, what have we done? What have we done so far to find out how do these people have access to this kind of money? What are the loopholes? what gives them access to this kind of volume of money? So these are some of the questions that will help inform the kind of strategy we will design to be able to address corruption. Data analysis properly is very, very key. I think ICPC and EFCC should also engage in proper data analysis, reel out this data for people to see and find out what is actually the drivers of corruption within the ministries, within the local government, and within the states. And that is the only way we can make headway. In addition to what my colleagues have mentioned earlier. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Newton Osemaye, who joined us all the way from Benin City in Edo State. Newton is the Program Director, Initiative for Policy Intervention and Development, and a consultant on the European Union Agent for Citizen-Driven Transformation Program. He was also a project manager on anti-corruption for Action in Nigeria between 2017 and 2020. Also managed the anti-corruption desk at the British Council with the J4 program. Thank you so much, Newton, for your time. And of course, from Ibadan, Babatunde Oluwajo joined us. He is a corruption risk analyst and board member of the Center for Transparency Advocacy. Thank you so much, Mr. Oluwajo, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Right here in the studio, Dr. Abubakar Akali, who is a senior lecturer at Bayes University here in the nation's capital. Thank you so much for joining us.
You said you are going to ask me very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
Well, yes, I have three propositions for checking corruption in the country. But before I say that, I would like to also advise that the plea bargain currently employed by the EFCC should be reviewed. It is actually boosting corruption instead of that. Now,
so
my first recommendation is
just bullet points.
We should have special anti-corruption courts. Secondly, we should have special anti-corruption laws. Third, we should have special anti-corruption judges. These three we need.
Yeah, if we have anti-corruption courts, then we should have anti-corruption judges too.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Akali is a senior lecturer at Bayes University here in the nation's capital. Well, just before we go, let's bring you up to date again from the Supreme Court. The Apex Court has affirmed the election of Governor Francis Nwifuru of the All Progressives Congress of Ebonyi State as a duly elected governor. Now, that brings the number so far to 5: Lagos, Bauchi, Kano, Zamfara, and now Ebonyi. So what is being expected now are the verdicts of the Supreme Court for Plateau and Abia states. So once again, the Supreme Court has affirmed the election of Francis Nwifuru of the APC as the duly elected governor of Ebonyi State. Well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. And we do hope that you are going to make contribute your own little quarter to fighting corruption in society and ensuring that we have a corrupt-free society where the resources, public resources, can be channeled towards development of the state, of the country, and alleviating poverty for the poor and the downtrodden in our communities. Thank you so much for your time, and bye for now. Thank you so much.